Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:11 p.m. Central. Uh, Last month we were on vacation and I had a flu and COVID outbreaks in the house. Luckily that's better. Uh, Still been feeling like sick. It's just weird. I don't know what's going on anymore. Like it's just something. But
It's life. It's killing you, man.
Let's just say this last week's been short-tastic, and that's all I'm gonna say. There's been like weird stomach. I don't know. It's like, is this crap gonna go away ever? Like there's something. It's like 3 rounds to it or something. But we got Wham here with us tonight.
Hey.
We got J.R. Mascaro. Did I say that correctly? I think I did.
Yeah, said it fine. How are you?
That's right. I figured I was. I just like to make sure. Don't want to Georgia it up. So where were you born?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. A sorcerer in New Jersey is like cyberpunk. Right. Like cyberpunk.
I was born in the like more rural part of New Jersey, which exists. It does exist.
Yeah, there are huge rural parts of New Jersey.
Everyone just equates New Jersey to like immediately with the 10 miles within, the Newark airport vicinity. I'm like, there's more out there.
Right, or whatever is immediately across the river from New York City.
Yes.
Those are like the two,
The airport and Hoboken, that's what we got.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we just had I saw the Elvis movie a few days before I heard about the Lisa Marie Presley thing, and it was actually decent. Besides being as long as Lord of the Rings, I didn't think I could take Elvis for 3 hours, but I did it. It was good. Tom Hanks was a little weird in it, but he's like, I still don't know what the hell was going on with that. He's Colonel Parker, but it's like, is he a Nazi? Like he doesn't have a passport? Like, is he gonna, turn into? I don't know. It was weird. He sounded kind of like he was gonna Zickow, like turn into a Nazi or something. But it's worth watching. But then it was kind of eerie that a few days later she, was in the hospital and passed away. The movie's good though. That actor, I don't remember his name, but he did a really good job. It seemed like it had to be grueling. Like he was on stage all the time and had to be, Fat Elvis and, Death Elvis and all the different ones, which I like Elvis. But Capricorn, I'm a Capricorn. He's a Capricorn. Hunka burning Capricorn. Are we still in Capricorn versus Mercury retrograde?
Until the 18th.
The 18th.
Until the 18th.
So what do you, first off, Wham, and then maybe JR can add some to it. What did are you feeling anything from it? Like,
yeah, I mean, Mercury retrogrades don't bother me quite as much as they do some people because I kind of know how to deal with them. But this one has been interesting for me because it's really been about, it's not that there have been a lot of mechanical things or anything, although I have had to be sometimes a little bit,
excuse me,
a little bit patient with machinery, but it's not like anything is broken down. It's been more like I have to pay a lot of attention to actually my intentions behind some of my communications, because if I'm clumsy about that, it sort of comes back to me. I mean, Capricorn is important in my chart. I've got a lot of it. So, and I have a lot of Saturn. So, I have to really, whenever Capricorn is in a prominent place, whether it's, Pluto's in Capricorn, because that's been true lately until this year. Whenever Capricorn is featured, I have to pay attention. So, I mean, that's just how it's been affecting me. It hasn't been like wrecking my life or anything.
JR, how's that play into your life? Is that something you get into or think about in your work? Or
I'm not incredibly immersed in astrology, just because I have friends who are, and I kind of go to them for my scoop. I am a Capricorn, so Capricorn season is always
that's right,
prominent for me. Yep.
This guy right here.
But no, this
Capricorn too. Cool.
Yep, this retro almost is almost going to be Sagittarius, but I was born earlier than I was scheduled, so Capricorn it is. But
What's your birthday?
I am born day after Christmas.
That's weird. I'm the day after Christmas.
No way!
Yes, the
Boxing
26th,
Day.
Yep.
Boxing Day.
1974.
Boxing.
And
Yep,
how old
there
are
we
you?
go.
I'm 48.
I'm 35.
Young pan of a man. I always tell the weird story about Pan and Wham's like, oh, please don't. But the weirdest story I found about him and is that why the sign was made. And I think we got into it some in a more deeper level. But the weirdest thing I remember from it is it said Pan was caught self-pleasuring. And I don't know where I read this, but he got caught by the gods. They threw him into the Nile River and gave him a serpentine tail. And I think we've talked about some like Typhonia or something weird with Pan and all that. I don't remember who I talked to about, but we got into it more. But it was just weird. It's like their whole sign's based on Pan getting caught wanking and being cast into the River Nile. Like, wow. But weirdly enough, and I don't want to get into this too much because I didn't even want to get into this at all. In high school, a situation happened at home where my mother walked in on me with Guns N' Roses blaring, and I was self-pleasuring. I was like 16 or something. My brother told my best friend went to school, and I went to school, and hundreds of people made fun of me. Hundreds. School teachers. Like,
Wow.
I remember a coach coming up to me and going, "Hey, Jeffrey, how you doing?" And I would go shake his head and be like, "Oh, no, I don't want to touch your hand."
Wow.
And here's the messed up part about it, though, where it gets a lot more depressing. The next year, testicular cancer.
Oh,
Lost one, chemo. So I felt there's something about that archetype that I relate to for some reason. It's different stories, but there's something weird. I don't know what. Maybe we're Pan, really. I don't know, but there's something weird with it for sure. But there's one thing I want to mention, and then we'll get into your book. And let me make sure I'm saying this right. Seal, sigil, and call. I'm saying sigil, right?
Yes,
Sigil.
yeah,
Sigil.
absolutely.
Wow, I'm on a roll tonight. A new approach to ritual magic. And I wanted to mention a friend that passed away. And the other day, I'm trying to depress everybody, apparently. I saw an article about Jack Nicholson. And I love Jack Nicholson, his movies. I've seen probably all of them. There may be a couple of weird ones I missed from the older days, but I don't know if I have. But anyway, the article is about him being 85 and he's lost his mind. Like he's in his house on Mulholland Drive or whatever. His kids are his only visitors. He doesn't leave his house and his mind's gone, they say. And they said this publicly, and it was in the big, articles and stuff. And he physically, they say he's okay, but his mind's gone, and they think he's going to, do a Marlon Brando, which is the reclusive, Crokin situation. It was just sad. And I remember a story a long time ago from somewhere where Jack Nicholson put chains on his refrigerator to keep Marlon Brando out because Marlon Brando lived next door and was always raiding his refrigerator when they were alive. But anyway, I saw that. I was like, that's depressing. And then I look on Facebook. My friend Kevin Candela passed away. And Kevin was on the show. And he was, let me look at everything that he was. I know he was like a engineer, like aerospace engineer for maybe NASA or something. And he did all that. And he came on the show and talked about his UFO sighting and stuff. And he wrote some different books that were kind of weird, like where he mixed the Argonauts with Sinbad. And they're on Amazon, but that's Kevin, Candela. And he always hanged out in the group and stuff, and it was just sad. Like he seems like this hippie dude that you wouldn't just think would croak out of the blue, but it turned out he was going through esophagus cancer, and he didn't want to tell anybody. He wanted it to be like a success story when it was done, and well, he croaked during it. But Kevin, hopefully you're out there in the perimeter, stoned immaculate right now. And it was just sad. That Jack Nicholson article on that day was like put me into a weird depression. I was like 2 punches. boom, boom. And but anyway, I just want to do a little memorial for him for a minute because he was on the show and he was talked about something Shadow Poker, some kind of organization that he was paranormal and shared a UFO story and things like that. But and there we have it. And JR, I guess the main reason we do this show is because we've had weird stuff happen to us. After I went through cancer and all that crap, several years later, my dad died, and I started to have a lot of weird experiences where I saw beings of light, completely sober, and also in other states of partying consciousnesses. And I saw two leave my house and had some UFO kind of stuff happen. That was weird, and seen some different types of beings. I don't know if I was ever abducted, but they certainly were over my house, and you wonder, it's like, did they do it and, mind wipe me? But the point is, that's why we do the show, because weird stuff happened to us, and it's odd. I think it's like year 15 now. I'm off count. I know it was 13 at some point. Oh, Friday the 13th. Can't forget that too. But I guess what I want to ask is, what started you on this path of, magic? What's the catalyst?
So it's so funny, actually, because I have a lot of friends who can point to very specific, catalyzing influences in their lives and say, well, it's because this happened and it freaked me out and I wondered what else is out there. I got to go looking. But for me, it's just kind of always been this, like a music that suffuses my life. For as long as I can remember, there's been something there that's drawn me to explore, to push the boundaries, to question reality, and how concrete it is, and how explicable it is. So ever since I was small, I've always kind of been testing those boundaries, seeking after what else might be out there. So I don't really have a this is the day it started kind of thing. It's just kind of always been an undertone, into an overtone at this point of my life. So I firmly believe it's something I've taken from previous incarnations or previous states of consciousness into this one.
What is an Eidolon?
And
That right?
I go with Eidolon, but different people pronounce it differently, and I didn't invent the word, so however you wish. But to me, an Eidolon is either a conscious thought form that's part of the self, that is able to be summoned up through ritual, or that is in one paradigm if you look at magic as an internal work. If you look at magic as an external work in which you are interfacing with various powers and consciousnesses of existence, then it is a manifestation of that, a spirit being, a guide, or helper that you can contact. And I've had conversations with other ritualists and occultists, and the Eidolon state, the Eidolon being that I speak about, is almost interchangeable with those in other systems because it is just a way to label something. And that's something I very much stress, is that we each experience existing differently and we each experience the world differently. And I can call it an Eidolon, someone else can call it something else, but we're still interfacing with the same kind of omnipresent consciousness.
And what do they look like visually? Have you seen them visually? Or is a thought form? Is it like a being?
Yes. So once again, this is you're going to get a lot of this from me. There's a lot of subjectivity in magic and in any inner work. To me, it is a visualized being. So for instance, if I am doing a ritual with, let's say the 8th Eidolon, I will experience the presence of that Eidolon. Depending on where I am and how focused in ritual I am, it might be a glimpse, it might be a vision in my mind's eye, or it might be something that I see. And to me, the 8th Eidolon usually appears as a glowing being of light who is enrobed in a tapestry that looks like the night sky, usually holding one of its kind of symbols of office.
Glowing being of light. That's always fascinating when that comes up, especially when you've seen them. Like, leave your house on different levels. And what about the sigils, the symbols? Is that from something in particular, or do you make your own?
I would say I received them, would kind of be how I do it. They were transmitted to me uh, by the Eidolons themselves. So the process of working with an Eidolon in the book, the first several chapters are to, it goes on the assumption that, you can pick this book up having done no magic and work effective magic. So the first few chapters are very focused on putting yourself in the mindset to be uh, self-sovereign, to be conscious, to be present moment aware and uh, protected and centered. And from there, it goes into the actual work with the eidolons. So to look at the different, essentially, seals, sigils, and calls, hence the name of the book, a seal, when you meditate on or otherwise attempt to illuminate or discover an eidolon, the seal is usually the first thing that comes to you, a way to make contact in a more formalized ritual way. Whereas a sigil and call, a call being a phrase that you mutually agree upon with the eidolon that touches upon the archetypal nature of them, and a sigil being a small symbol, either drawn upon paper or I make mine out of clay, things like that. That when you utter that call and hold that sigil, you can go into contact with them in a more immediate and instantaneous way than in a formal large ritual.
And I see there's celestials who occupy a higher vibrational band of existence. And then you talk about ascendant magicians and ascendant spiritual seekers. And then also, it's interesting when I think of celestials and the light, it makes me think of what I've seen. And I don't know if they're the same things. I think there are a lot of glowy things out there, but they're definitely glow like the sun. I think there's a connection with the sun in them, that light somehow, that divine manifestation. But here's an interesting one that's very fascinating. Primals are the ones who occupy a lower vibrational band of existence than the one in which we live, which I'm quoting from your book. And then it talks about them being of a deeper unconscious and pre-existential chaos. So that's kind of fascinating. Do you use the Necronomicon? No. Do you read Sutter Kane? No. But it's just fascinating. So what can you tell us about celestials and then the primals? Which primals is just creepy to talk about. They'll know it one day if you just talk about it.
So I classify into three different bands: the celestials, primals, and something called otherworld spirits, which are essentially occupy a similar or equivalent vibrational band to our own, but perhaps not in this dimension or plane or level of consciousness, however you want to, whatever language works best for you. But to me, when I look at these, I look at them very much like a frequency, almost musical in nature, rather than value driven. So when we say a higher vibrational frequency, we're not necessarily meaning a better one. When we say a lower vibrational frequency, we're not necessarily saying a lesser one. We're just saying that they are different experiences of being and of consciousness. And celestials do tend to be completely highly aligned with universal good, with the idea of, the many over the one, the unity of all things, compassion, acting justly, acting equitably. And they are inspirational, aspirational as well. They represent those parts of us that are striving for, a greater kindness. And primals are not necessarily bad creatures, because people do kind of have that kind of idea of like a lower vibrational creature being somehow corrosive or something like that. But they are muddy, I guess is a way to put it. Like they're difficult to communicate with compared to celestials, especially. They are singular creatures, singular beings that are very concerned with whatever it is they do. And they operate as that protocol. So, for instance, the third eidolon is a primal, and the third eidolon is concerned with mostly insects and small creatures and things like that, and shepherding them and communicating with them. And whereas a celestial could theoretically assist you in almost anything, a primal is very singularly minded. So I would go, if I were to be working with the third Eidolon, I'd be like, well, I want to get these bees to leave my property, or I wish to understand, the industrious represented by ants or something like that. But if I were to say, can you help me master a musical instrument? It would be like, this does not compute. I cannot do this because it's not part of my very specific vibrational band.
Are they there just to bring forth madness and bring forth Cthulhu from the ocean? Is that have you seen them? What do they look like? I mean, some weird reptilian.
So, the primals, well, all eidolons, I stress this, appear to the magician in the way that they believe will best translate their nature to the magician, and they are not bound by our concepts of a physicality or incarnation. They can be whatever they wish because they are beings of energy and beings of concept. But for instance, the third eidolon often appears as kind of a thin, humanoid form, very often with a veiled face, wings that are as many layered insect wings, and its left arm is often a mantis-like arm.
Weird. We talked about Manus aliens recently on the show. Someone he woke up when he was a kid and saw grays and a mantis standing there. It's just kind of weird for sure. And I saw Metatron in here. I've heard of Metatron from some different things. Who is that exactly? Metatron? And you use archangels in a lot of your work?
So for Metatron, you saw that we're doing the lesser banishing ritual of Pentacle and the middle pillar. And in the LBRP, I don't particularly work specifically by name with archangels because I mostly work with the eidolons, both the ones in this book and the many others that I have illuminated over the years. But to honor the tradition of the lesser banishing ritual of the Pentacle, where we set our space, we set our intention, and we're calling on the quarters and we're calling on the archangels, I do incorporate Metatron and Sandalphon in addition to Raphael and Michael and Gabriel and Uriel.
I've called on Archangel Michael a lot to clear houses and things like that. And definitely a lot of the stuff I've seen about that is like light worker stuff. Some of that's good, but some of it's a little too much. But it definitely is interesting. And the Kabbalah, is that? I always find those names. I know I have some books on how do you say it? The Kabbalah? Kabbalah.
Depending on what tradition you're hooking yourself up to.
And I know what
Kabbalah.
Yeah. I'm going to say the names of the different ones, and I'm sure I'll say them wrong, and then maybe you guys could say them so we say them right. But maybe I'll get them right. I don't know. Probably not. Kether, Dath, Tipperath, Yesod, Malkuth. I know I have a book and I've said
you're pretty close.
That's pretty good.
Cool. That's good. I've said them before. I know there's something to them because you can feel it, sort of. Is it the tree of life?
Yeah. Well,
what is that, like the names of the branches or something? Or the points, the power points in the tree of life.
The names of the Sephiroth and the middle pillar are those.
And the Sephiroth, that's the angels that are.
Sephiroth.
Those are considered angels. So is that the name? That's the five. So that's the five names of the different angels.
No, the Sephiroth are the different loci, the nexuses, the points of consciousness, points of concentrated being on the tree of life. But I also don't want to get too into it because I am not a Kabbalist. However, I am storing and utilizing that information for myself, but also I communicate it as it was communicated, as I cite in the book. The version of the middle pillar I have there was from Israel Regardé, as brought to us through the Golden Dawn.
So the tree of life has chakras, dude.
Well, those are systems that have been sort of melded together. I would call, I mean, what the Golden Dawn did was a kind of uh, syncretic bricolage. You know what I mean?
Yes.
They took Western Hermetic Kabbalah, such as they understood it or interpreted it, since there's more than one way to do that, and then they also, they were kind of doing a theosophical thing, and they took some they took some basic yoga ideas and put them together. They were seeing where they overlapped is what they were doing. I mean, if you're a purist, you're not going to, of either system, you're not going to like that. But it's like, so, I mean, Americans mostly do bricolage. So that's sort of what we do. I mean, I noticed at least in the bibliography that was included in your PDF, that that one of the books you've used is from Damien Eccles, who I happen to like quite a bit myself and have read some of his stuff. Actually went into a workshop he gave once when he was doing some stuff up here. And, he's very much because he was in prison and he couldn't do the ritual stuff externally or a lot of external practices. He had to learn how to do this stuff internally. And so what I liked about what you were doing, I mean, even though you talk about ritual, and certainly much of what you do can be, much of what you talk about can be done externally. Like if a person's going to be like a full-blown ceremonial magician type of thing, is that you can actually do most of what you're talking about in the book internally. Because one of the things that I learned to do very, very early, because I was first, when I was training in occult stuff and all this stuff way back when, I was being trained in the visualization traditions of Vajrayana Buddhism, which are fairly extensive. And, the whole practice of, imagining the inner and outer mandala and all of that stuff. And so when I was introduced to ceremonial magic, I was a member of a lodge for a while, and we did do external stuff, but I realized that what I got into was more of the internal visualization stuff. I thought that was much more important to me personally. And what I like about what you're talking about, your approach, is that it pulls on the traditional stuff in the correct areas, so that if a person is familiar with a little bit of Crowley or a little bit of Golden Dawn, they'll be able to go, oh yeah, here's where this stuff is, right? But then they'll be able to look what you've done with it and sort of apply it in their own way. And to me, that's really what the power of any magical system is, because eventually you're going to have to do your own thing anyway, right? You're just going to have to do it anyway.
I really appreciate that. That was very much the goal in the first, I'd say, third of the book. Essentially, my goal was to get people to a aware, grounded, protected, energetically charged state. And there are already so many traditions that do that, that people could be familiar with. So my goal was to provide people with many different avenues for doing that, as well as some of my own avenues that are completely, system and tradition agnostic. So people who are not comfortable, in engaging in any tradition could just say, well, this meditation has been just a completely original meditation I can use to reach a state of centered awareness. Because very much my goal for the book was to let people and encourage people to just get off the rails with it completely, to say, here is a framework, almost to use programming language here. This is a framework that I'm giving you, and I encourage you to build whatever fulfills you on this framework. Whatever makes you feel like, your soul is singing and you are doing the magic that awakens you and helps you and inspires you. So there was definitely, as you said, a lot of pre-existing traditions people are definitely familiar with to a degree, that have sort of penetrated the American esoteric consciousness, so to speak.
Right,
And
right.
I wanted to offer those, but also say, but also if you want to not do any of these things, that's completely fine. Do what works for you. Here's some things that have worked for me in the past.
Right, right. Well, and the thing that I thought was interesting as I was going through my own process in my life was, once I started moving from the Vajrayana sort of framework, I did a deep dive into mystical Judaism for a long time. I mean, serious deep dive, not just the weird dabbling that Madonna does, or
Did you
did.
go get all the copies of the
And,
Zohar?
and maybe she's more serious about it than I think, but whatever. Yeah, I mean, like I learned Hebrew, and I actually converted to Judaism in order to actually go deep into this. And what I found was that in esoteric Jewish Orthodox tradition, they do something very similar with the temple. A lot of those Kabbalistic meditations that the Golden Dawn ended up inheriting and doing things with are actually based on internal meditations that are done during prayer by Orthodox Jewish communities, and a lot of what they were doing was very similar, at least in approach. It was the creation of a temple. So in Vajrayana Buddhism, you're creating the mandalas, and in Judaism, you're creating the temple, but it's the temple of your body. It's not just the temple of that's around you physically. And so I realized, a lot of these people are doing kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Their details are different, but they're trying to bridge that gap between what you think your body is and all that stuff and all these other realms out here. There are realms in here and realms out there. And so that began a process whereby I realized that, if I'm going to take Buddhism seriously, there is no inside or outside. So if I'm doing the work inside, the work is happening outside too.
Yep. Yeah, that's one that's very cool. But
I mean, it was like, oh, it's like, duh.
the other, but yeah. So for me, I've always, since I was a kid, sometimes to the dismay of my teachers, kind of felt like we live in a bit of a puppet show. The material world is kind of a allegorical place for us to hash some things out. And it's certainly not the be all and end all of things. So a lot of my friends who had gotten into, kind of traditionalist ceremonial magic had this idea of using magic to achieve whatever earthly goal they might have, which I address in my book. And I say that, sometimes a magician needs to pay the rent. So, do, as long as you're not hurting anyone, do whatever you'd like, do it their will.
Exactly.
But I have always seen magic as an avenue towards transcendence in a way, because it's the only thing I can take with me. When I shed this body and this form is no more, I will not have, any cool stuff I've hoarded in my house, but I will have any wisdom I may have gained and any strengthening of will and any deepening of compassion. And that is why a lot of my work tends towards the internal, but also, as a former high school theater kid, I also understand the value of pageantry and the value of symbolism and the value of allegory. So that's why I always offer in my exercises, hey, if you want to use, incense, if you want to use crystals, if you want to get a censer, if you want to go out there and get a solid gold 6-foot rod, more power to you. But you don't need to. And that's also an accessibility issue for me, both an accessibility in terms of, physical ability and accessibility in terms of financial accessibility.
Money.
Yeah. I don't want to tell people, oh, hey, go get this $600, extract that you can only get from this tiny little supplier in the Himalayas. I want to say, hey, if you want to use olive oil or nothing, what matters is that it exists in your mind, because all we are seeing is simply a reflection of some sort of matter that then beams its way through our eyeballs and translates to our mind. So we can cut out the middle, man, and just think about it.
That's about right. That's about right. It's sort of like when I was reading it, I was like, wow, a no BS magical companion here.
I really appreciate that.
No BS.
That'd be a good blurb, right?
Yeah, no BS here. No BS here.
I gotta put that on the Instagram.
Yeah, really.
A no BS magical companion dash wham in quotes. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. You may quote me. Yeah. So
And,
the other thing I really appreciated, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you realized this in yourself, because this is sort of the way I work too. Is that, one of the things that always drove me crazy about ceremonial magic when I was in the lodge was that there were people that were in our group, and this was just what their gift was. They had the ability to actually see stuff, like externally, like see stuff. Like there are some people like Jeffrey who see, he sees beings of light. He sees that kind of stuff. I'm not much of that in this world. I've seen a few things. I've had a few experiences, but I'm not really a person who sees stuff like that. I may see things with internally with my inner eye, if you will, but not externally. But I am a person who hears things, and music and tone and sound have always been really, really important for my ability to connect with other realms, and in a sense the truth of something, sense the truth of a communication that I'm having with something or whatever. So, what is it? Do you? Is this something that you've always kind of done? Because you talk about the sound of these consciousnesses. So tell me about that.
So yeah, I use the technique in my book called tonal resonance a lot, which is very sound based. And for me, music has always been a big part of my life. My mother was and is a musician, and was always singing and playing music around the house. And I have always kind of communicated in that way. And I will assign a tonal value. I will hear a tonal value, a chime, a glissando, whatever it might be, in my work. And I've also always had a very scientific mind. Actually, in my day job, I am a computer scientist actually, and I've always had a very kind of empirical mindset towards things. One of the things was because when I was younger, honestly, until I met a few people who kind of heard and did and engaged in the same things I did, I was kind of like, how do I prove to myself that I'm not just a little nuts?
Right.
In a harmless way, I know, but maybe I'm just hearing stuff. And I did it through experimentation, through applying stimuli and noting if it was a repeatable response I got from that stimuli. And tone was one of the big ones for me. Using tuning forks, a kalimba, a flute, something that's portable, easily makes noise, and seeing how the energy around me react to that. Because that is actually, while I'm like you in some ways, insofar as the majority of my sight is most often, especially when I'm out and about and not in a very conscious ritual state, I'm seeing in my mind's eye. It's very strong visions I get in my mind's eye, but that's still where it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see with my eyes or perhaps some other organ I cannot identify, perhaps my third eye. I do see patterns of energy around me, and tone is one of the things that affects those patterns and repeatably and consistently affects those patterns. And that's something that for a lot of my life I experimented with, because I've been to many optometrists, because I was like, is this a physical thing? Or is it a neurological thing? And no, according to my doctors, I am fine. but it is still a thing that I see, and a thing that has repeatable tonal, response.
I guess what I would say is that the only way I can relate to kind of what you're saying is that I do have synesthesia with sound, so that like certain tones or sounds create patterns that, and when I was young, I would see these patterns like hanging in the air, like a bell or something like that. As I got older, I guess I learned to kind of shut that off a little bit. I have to now be in sort of an altered state to see it as clearly as I used to. But like if I hear music, like I hear a song, I can almost always tell you what key it's in because there'll be a color in my mind.
Wow.
It'll present itself as a color. And so like each of the keys there's like each note in our scale has a particular color, and then like everything in C are various shades of that color, and everything in A are various shades of that color. And that's true whether they're minor or whatever. It's odd, but I used to think everybody was like that.
See, that's very cool though.
and I realized one day, oh my God, like hardly anybody's like this, because people would be like, so, do you like the song? And I'd be like, yeah, that song's really red. And they're like, what are you talking about? But so I do see, and like, for example, there have always been these tones in, like, if I sit really quietly and I just go internally, there are these tones that I hear that are always present inside my head, like inside my brain.
Well, are you I'm sure you are familiar with the concept of Naadam.
Yes.
Yeah. I've always felt like there's probably some background tone to everything that we, maybe have drowned out at this point.
Right. Well, and I know what my tone is. I've got a couple of tones. I've got a low tone and a high tone.
Oh, very cool.
And I know what they are. And if I'm like afraid or something, I can just, like, something startles me, I can just kind of go back to that tone. And it just goes away. So, I was very intrigued by your use of sound. That sound is part of how you connect with these different eidolons. I thought that was very cool, because I think that isn't something that is talked about a lot in ceremonial magic. I mean, at least I haven't encountered it frequently.
To me, tonality is also emotionality.
Right.
So, like when I'm doing the tonal resonance exercise, I don't see tone, although that would be pretty cool. But when I, make a tone, like let's say I'm playing, a flute, and I sound a note, I will get a emotional response from that. Kind of and tonal resonance is usually used to contact the concept of vestiges, which in my system are kind of proto thought forms, small, oftentimes fragmented consciousnesses that you can't really talk to in the way you would an eidolon, which is kind of a realized concept and a realized being. So it's kind of a yes, no, directional, emotional kind of contact. And I really do feel that music and just raw tone, not even necessarily music, just raw sound, lends itself very well to that.
So you introduce us to 18 eidolons in this book. I'm assuming there are more than that.
I would generally say that there are nigh infinite eidolons, but the whole journey of the system, which I call pan-idolism, because generally we should name things, and
our editors make us, right?
There's 18, but the whole point is, the first third, like I said, gets you prepared to work with eidolons, period. The second introduces you to ways to work with eidolons and particular eidolons you can work with that I've already spoken to. I know these beings. If you consider them beings, or if you consider them archetypes of yourself, once again, I'm not only accepting of, but very much encouraging of people interpreting things in the way that resonates with them. But once you've done that and said, well, okay, I've engaged with, I'd say at least 3, hopefully all 18, if you have the time and the inclination. It's then the next part is to learn to illuminate your own eidolons and learn to start really tailoring your practice to be like not indistinguishable from, but very diverse in terms of the manifestations of the practice. Like, I would love to have, multiple people who pick up this book and decide they want to try this, to have things that you could recognize come from this system, but are otherwise in their manifestations completely unique and beautiful. To say, well, I work with these types of eidolons, and these are the types of rituals I do, these are the symbolism I use, this is the lexicon I use, this is what I call myself, and it's completely different from someone else who does, but we could probably still write down the seal of an eidolon to share with each other if we wanted to.
Yeah, that would be very cool, because in that sense, you're sort of everybody is sort of, or everybody would be making their own connections, and yet at the very same time, everybody that would be doing this would be finding ways in which they could find where their expression of this or that eidolon shared certain characteristics, where it overlapped. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody, obviously, Now, I will confess, I did not read through all of your eidolons. Okay, I didn't have time this week to do that. So
That's all right.
but I can go back and do that, obviously. But so if I'm asking you something that is obvious and I should have read, you can call me stupid, but
I never would.
But have you encountered an eidolon that is connected in any way to fungi specifically?
Okay, yeah, that is a very interesting question. There is a eidolon, which is actually really interesting because this is the 13th eidolon, and a few other people I have spoken to about this who have decided to essentially read the book and then randomly pick an eidolon, in a random number generator kind of way to work with first, have landed on the 13th eidolon.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, the 13th eidolon is a eidolon that represents the idea of the cycles of decay and rebirth, and is very, very strongly aligned to the energies of swamps, and moss and lichen and fungi. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting, because the reason I say is that I know a woman who wrote an entire book called The Maze Game, in which, and she has a long tradition, and there's a whole story here, which we will not go into, but she has a long tradition of, and this is an actual thing, of being paid by laboratories in the United States that have government contracts to be a test subject for different kinds of drugs, particularly hallucinogens. A lot of people don't know that this type of research continues, but it's very clandestine. But she has had, this was many years ago, they were testing her with extracts from various hallucinogenic mushrooms, psilocybin, peyote, whatever. And she had this extraordinary experience, apparently, at one point. It changed her life, where she encountered this is how she described it. She encountered as she put it, the oversoul, or the overlighting, consciousness that oversees fungi. And she had an exchange with it, and I know this sounds crazy to people, but in the process of her exchange with it, it actually helped her produce an alphabet, a very distinctive sigil alphabet, and way of written communication that I can't even describe it. It expresses ideas on like several different levels, like certain meta. I almost think you kind of need an algorithm to describe it. And but anyway, she ended up writing a book about, and it's a fiction book about a civilization that was that came out of the expression of this language, and it's a reconfiguring of what our world would be if this consciousness decided to take control of this of our existence for one reason or another, and how this language would be used to redefine what certain types of consciousness were. And when she told me about it, I mean, most people don't even know what this book is, because it's really hard to read. I mean, it's really hard to read because it forces you to think in really, really different ways. And but the concept behind it is how would our reality change if a completely different type of consciousness began to actually reorganize organic life here.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack in that, and I love
I know.
No, I love it because we're touching on sigil alphabets, which I have in my book. Actually, I tell people.
I know. When I saw them, I was like, "Oh my God, this looks at what Donna did."
What's the book too? Tell us the book when you can.
Well, the book is called The Maze Game. The Maze Game, and it's by her name is Donna Slattery or something. I don't even know that it's on Amazon. It's like I have one of the few copies that exist. Probably
it's there.
I'll keep an eye out for it. Is it there?
Yeah, it is.
The Maze Game.
Diana Reed. It's a science fiction novel.
Yes.
Cult of Mortal Death Dancers. And it's on there. It's only like $4.54. So.
Well, now I'm gonna go get it.
Yeah.
Well, before JR says something, I just wanted to say real quick. When I did DMT, I saw weird writing on the wall, and it was really weird. And I was like walking up to it, touching it. It's like, I don't know what it was, because when you're going through that, it's just I couldn't believe it. And I haven't done that in a while. I wish I could.
Diana Reed Slattery. Yeah.
And I saw weird sigils on the wall, and I don't remember what they were, but I know they were there. And I actually, while I was going through it, walked up to it and touched it, and it was like it's on the wall. But of course, when it was over, it was not on the wall. So, the other thing I want to say real quick: The Last of Us, which is a pretty good game that won a lot of awards. The show starts on HBO this weekend. They're saying it's amazing, but what it's about is like fungi zombies, and the plant life takes over. And it's like the zombies, but they're like weird spores and crazy. It's really, the game is amazing. So they're saying the show's really good, but that's a weird thing about that kind of stuff taking over. But go ahead, JR.
Well, on that note, every time I think about sapient plant life, I think of Swamp Thing, and we can get into a whole nother conversation about Alan Moore and his history of esotericism. But
I have those.
Yeah, the name of the language is Glide. That is actually the name of the language, and all you have to do is just sort of read it says The Maze Game is a science fiction novel, tells the story of a cult of mortal death dancers who for 2,000 years have kept the immortal lifers riveted with the brutal beauty of combat in a maze made of the visual language Glide. The dancer is pitted against an immortal player, and though the player may win many times, the maze game always eventually ends in the spectacle of the dance of death. Now the survival of the game itself is threatened. Dance Master Walenda and the 4 young dancers of the Millennium class battle Joreen, the drug lord, plotting to regain control of the game. There's like political stuff in here about drugs, people misusing drugs for their own purposes. Walenda is forced by Joreen to reveal the dark secrets of the maze game's origin at the risk of destroying his students' commitments to the dance. But the greatest force undermining the game is love. But it's a certain type of love, it's not romantic love or sentimental
agape all
exactly. Yeah, I mean, like absolute agape is terrifying to the ego, so
but no, I think mycelium is actually a really excellent metaphor for or even just direct cognate, because I always talk about the interconnected network of being, that all things are in direct communication and direct vibration with each other, and mycelium is kind of the perfect example of that, a complete, to the person walking on the surface, if we're going to use that as a metaphor for the surface reality, what is underneath is, not even considered or thought about when we look at a mushroom. Most people aren't going to say, oh, hey, there's miles of mycelium underneath the ground, letting us communicate with everything.
They're not going to do what I do, which is like, oh, look, a fruiting body.
Yes.
Oh, look, sex organs right here.
Yeah.
That's what I do, literally. Oh, look at these sex organs. Look at all the fins. Look at the spores. But yeah, it's like I guess I've been fascinated with fungi because they seem to represent a kind of, or they just don't represent, they are a kind of life on the planet that is different from plant and animal life,
mm-hmm.
and is really along with bacteria, pretty much run everything.
Yeah, they're completely essential to life on Earth.
Yeah, pretty much run everything. How about that, Jeffrey?
Definitely fascinating for sure. Trip you out for sure.
Yeah, trip you out.
And so, what's up with these freighters?
What?
Freighter Barabbas. I had a freighter on my show.
I personally knew Freighter Barabbas when. Okay, in fact, the lodge that I was speaking of, it was his.
Wow.
So he knows who I am. So,
and I've always been
his real name is Brian.
That sounds like an observational comedy routine to me. Get up on the stage. So, what's with all these freighters?
Yeah, no. When he said that, what I thought of? I thought of like, is this a potato product?
These potatoes, these freighters. I've met the dark freighter Tenebris. Have you ever heard of him? He writes a little one. He was on the show. It was a good interview, but I don't like Geraldo Rivera, but I felt like Geraldo Rivera interviewing, like, he's not really a Satanist, but he got into like weird devil pacts and weird like Lucifer stuff, and it was just like I felt like a Geraldo freaking out from like a Christian perspective or something during the whole thing, but it was good. But one thing I saw in your book, and I don't know if it should be okay to read this little invocation thing. It doesn't sound too dangerous. I call you to witness, infallible geometers of the Most High, you beneficent spirits, whom the children of mortality have named angels, divas, amisha spintas,
Did you say divas?
Divas. Devas. Trying to do Christopher Walken here. Christopher Walken. Amisha spintas, Bodavistas, ascendant magicians, and numberless epithets, lost to the ages, beings of powerful joy, whose faces are faucets in the jewels of myriad faiths. Attend me, anoint me with the chrisms of compassion, and lend me your radiant power. I draw forth this power to banish evil. I draw forth this power to amplify compassion. I draw forth this power to heal the unseen wounds of this world. I charge this power with a thirsting justice and unrelenting kindness and my inexpressible will. That's deep. For sure. That's like some Gandalf kind of stuff. Sure. So have you ever been in a wizard war? I've had a freighter on that's been in a wizard war. Remember that one? I have to find his name. There's another.
I am a proponent of peace.
What was that? Ice? Remember that? Something about Ice Wizard Swam and the guy.
Oh, that was Stephen Flower.
No, wait.
No, it was Stephen Flower. No. It was Stephen Flower's friend.
It was another freighter.
Yeah, it was another.
Tenebris. Wait,
yes,
no, that's not it. That's
and
not
he was
it.
talking about ice magic.
Ralph Techmeyer.
Yeah. He was talking about ice magic. Right. You're right.
Yeah, that's who. Does he do Little One books? I know he's been around for sure, but he got into all that like weird wizard war with some wizards. It was definitely. I don't remember the details of the show's on the site, but
I'm all about wizard friendship.
That's
where I'm at.
Have you ever thought about becoming freighterized?
You know,
well, you can if you want to. You can just name yourself that.
It's actually really funny because, like, I know a lot of people who go by, you know, the frauder or freighter title, but I actually feel some days like I missed my boat because I just use my initials, and there are people out there with all these like cool names like, you know, Phoenix and stuff like that, and I'm like, wow, no, it's just Jr. But
There we go.
That's fine.
Junior.
not a junior.
Junior Mascaro from Georgia. Now I'm thinking about what's the guy? Ernest P. Worrell Saves Christmas. Me and Christina watched that for Christmas. It's fun. Just
Yeah. One of the things I love about the whole, you know, magical or occult or esoteric, however you want to couch it, community is how diverse, you know, we are in our approaches of things. So I mean, I can talk to someone, you know, who a friend of mine who is, I completely respect everything they do, and we'll have like literally nothing in common with how we approach it.
Well, and that's, you know, that's fine. You know, I mean, I remember when I was in graduate school, I had this experience where it was just, we were taking this course in, what were we taking this course in? It was like in, it was the history of Jewish philosophy or something, or ethics. I can't even really remember. But anyway, it was like, I was taking it. It was one of those seminar classes that you could take as an undergraduate or a graduate student. But if you were a graduate student, you had to do more work, obviously. So there were like two of us, two graduate students and all these undergraduates, which was fine. But we had to write this, like each one of us, the graduate students, had to write like this huge 35-page paper, and then at the end of the class give the paper, right? So me and John Allen, he was the other graduate student. Now John Allen was one of these like really linear guys, you know what I mean? He would like start his paper, you know, like months ahead, and he'd have his, and he would just laboriously do it. I really liked him. He's a good writer. He is actually now the Vatican correspondent for CNN and a whole bunch of other news outlets. So he's actually very, very good at what he does. But he's very linear, and I knew he was working on his paper. I was one of these people that I would collect all my stuff, and then like 3 days before the paper was due, I did like a 35-hour marathon and throw the whole thing together. That's how I always did my papers. You know, I always
I'm right there with you.
Yeah. My papers were like, they were great, but they were like usually pretty good, but they were like, you know, sweat and you know, the result of adrenaline and too much coffee. Yeah, exactly, too much coffee. So anyway, we did our papers, and I can't remember what my paper was on, something to do with because we got assigned our topics, something to do with the progression of how women are portrayed in the book of Judges. That's how I had to do mine. And in fact, I even got assigned some of the sources that I had to use. So anyway, I ended up doing this really, the way that I usually do stuff is I start with something, and then I sort of do this spiral, unraveling it, and then come back. That's so the way I'm organized is kind of in a spiral and you know, circular. That's kind of how I organize. Whereas John is very like this, you know, everything's an outline. He's a great writer. He really is, because he can be very funny, but it's very linear. So he did his, and I did mine. We both got A's, all right, because my professor liked them both, and he was an amazing person. But I remember looking at John and saying to him, you know, I really wish I could write a paper like yours. And he looked at me and he was like, I was just thinking that about yours. You know, and so we had basically written the only papers we could write given who we were.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, and they were both perfectly fine.
Written through the lens of your experience.
Really different, you know,
yeah.
It's perfectly fine. I learned a very important lesson there, which was, number one, I actually do okay work. But number two, I don't have to be like anybody else.
Yeah.
You know?
Nor should you be, because we only have one of you.
There's only one of me. And I learned also that even if other people are doing stuff that's similar to what I'm doing, nobody does it like me. I do it my own way. So I just don't worry about it anymore at all. You just don't. So take that to heart, Jeffrey. Nobody does it like you and your masks.
This guy right here.
Sometimes he's been insecure about like other podcasts. It's like, no, just be happy with your podcast, bud.
I'm going to Mr. Rogers it. You are you. There is only one you, and you are special.
And you are special. That's
Mr.
why
Rogers,
you see little white cocoon people.
Mr. Rogers liked to fart on his wife.
There's nothing wrong with that if it was consensual.
At least he didn't get drunk and beat her up. Just farting on her.
I mean, who was it? James Joyce was also into that. He published a whole bunch of his love letters. Well, his estate did, and James Joyce, he was into some stuff.
I don't know who that is, though. I don't know if I want to know. Fartacular. The first spell I ever did, I want to maybe talk about some of the ones that you've done that are okay to talk about. But there was a Nazi weird bully in school that had Hitler in his locker, and he kept calling me fat and trying to attack me every day. And I had no idea why. I'd never said anything to him. I'd known him since like kindergarten or something. This was like, I don't know, 9th grade or something. Anyway, he kept picking on me. He goes, I'm going to pick on you and jump you every day unless you meet me at Wild Turkey Circle. And I was like, what's that? And I was quiet, very quiet, reclusive, book in the hallway, black, whatever. And like an idiot, I went there to fight him. And I wasn't someone that got in fights. But we beat each other up. He bit part of it's not visible now, but he actually bit a part of my teat off, my nipple, like a little piece from biting through the shirt. He's beating rocks on his head, going crazy. And the police came. There was hundreds of people there, and I left in my Batmobile car. I called it Batmobile. It was like I was 16 or whatever, or 17. I don't remember. But I remember doing a spell, and it was from that Raymond Buckland, was it? The blue book, the big blue witchcraft book?
The natural witchcraft
and
book.
It was peeing in a jar and doing nails and razors. And you pee in a jar, and you bury it in your yard. And I don't even know if I've ever done a spell since then. Maybe like some creative visualization or something. But that was like the first serious thing I ever did. And next thing you know, that guy fell through a plate glass window. His car got in a crazy wreck. He went to jail. He knocked a girl up. And later, my dad's passed, but somehow I heard that my dad took the lug nuts off his car. My dad was crazy. I don't know if that's true, but luckily the guy didn't die. So my dad's passed anyway, so they can't really do anything to him if he did do it. But it wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, that guy came to work and begged for forgiveness and asked for forgiveness because he knew that the next year I got cancer and stuff. So I guess he felt, not responsible, but felt bad or whatever. And that was the first one I'd ever done. But and now I do a lot of creative visualization stuff and positive affirmations and stuff like that. I haven't done the old pea jar and 20 plus years, but I'm just kind of curious. What were some of the first spells that you did? Or what are some that you do now? Are you Doctor Strange?
If only. I can never grow a goatee that even.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you do?
So
you do.
It's odd because there is a lot for a lot of people, and I understand it's odd on my part because for a lot of people, spell work is, it has a middle, there's a beginning, a middle, and end. I'm going to go and do this intentionally, and I have those, but they're very rare. A lot of those are for things like holidays, for equinoxes and solstices and things like that. My spell work is usually very on the fly because I have developed a working relationship with the Eidolons that I, work with, for lack of a better thing to say. And it is simply enacting will throughout the day. It's slightly nudging in a positive direction the various currents of causality that I might detect. And oftentimes it is listening to kind of that melody, that thought pulse of existence telling me I need to be in place A at time A because I am going to be needed there. And then I have the capacity to help in that place when I'm there. And that could be something like buying someone lunch, or it could be something like doing some more overt, esoteric work for someone. I try not to do what I will call irresponsible spell work. But as I said, I've been doing this since I was very small, so there have been some incidences of that in my life, especially in my teenage years. Although I'm happy to say none of it's been harmful. But I did once get my friend's neighbor to move, which was perhaps not the most responsible use of my, ability, but it was kind of positive for everyone because they moved because they got an unexpected job offer in another state the next day after the ritual was done. Because my friend had a neighbor that was in a unit above him that was constantly blasting music till 3 a.m. and smoking in the house and putting it through the vents, which was aggravating his asthma. And so I, called up the Eidolons at my disposal and we're like, hey, can we make it so this person maybe isn't there anymore, but in a way that it will harm no one? And they got offered a job 2 states over. So great. But
hey, I think that is perfectly fine because you're not wishing them harm. You just you don't want harm for yourself either. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. But normally I try to people kind of like let things take their course for people unless they need help. And I have been given the okay to provide that help, or been told by, like I said, that current that takes me through life that, hey, this person's struggling, help them out. Okay, what can I do? And is it something very magical, or is it simply listening to the magic and that tells me I need to go buy them a sandwich? But
I've done stuff like that. Like I've done things like when I was finishing my graduate degree, I worked for a total of 7 years at this one place, but I was continuing to work there towards the end of my graduate program at a metaphysical bookstore in Kansas City, Missouri. So we sold a lot of occult books and all kinds of things from all different types of traditions. And we also would get, like, as you can imagine, very, very special people that would come. This is what you refer to certain types of customers, that are into certain types of spirituality that that they become attached to those and they develop this kind of special sense about who they are and kind of act that way. And I ended up getting to this place where if they had ordered a book and they were particularly a particularly obnoxious person, and I didn't want to have to deal with them anymore, what I would actually do is I would pay for the book myself and then call them and tell them that the book had been paid for by someone so that they could come in and get it whenever they wanted to, so that I didn't have to put up with them. And it worked really, really well. Obviously I would give myself my discount, so it's not like I would pay for the entire price of the book. But what ended up happening a lot of times is that when they came in, because a lot of times people like that don't have a lot of money anyway, and that's probably part of why they're crabby. But it would sort of change the nature of their interaction in the place, And so I would do little spells like that, the killing them with kindness, but they don't know who did it.
Yeah, but I think that is in some ways some of the purest kind of kindness. When you're doing it for its own sake and not for the credit, you're just saying, oh, I did something nice. In this case, it also helped you out. So really, it was a win-win.
Right, exactly. And they'll never know, so it doesn't matter, It's like the best magic, the most to me the most important end of magic, whether you're doing bad stuff or not, or good stuff, and this is where like people who are even doing dark stuff screw up. You cannot let anyone know. I mean, the whole thing about to know, to will, to do, and keep silent. You cannot let anyone know specifically what you're doing. It wrecks it, and it wrecks it for you.
Well,
it just wrecks it.
That's actually that's always been an interesting concept to me, because one of the things that I say in Steel, Sigil, and Call is that all magic, the prime fuel of all magic is will. And will is, that's what you need. You don't need to go, like I said, buy expensive things or whatever. You need to focus, center yourself, and project, your intention. And I've always found that very interesting as silence or secrecy as a magical component, because at the end of the day, what you're doing there is isolating an effect to only your will. No one else knows what it is doing, and therefore no one else can willfully affect it.
Right. And to me, yeah, it's like holding, it's like holding that container. I mean, I don't really make a differentiation between will and love, actually, because for me, I define love a little bit differently than the way it's commonly defined, especially in magic, particularly by Crowley. And to me, love is sort of the will of the universe, in the sense of growth, maximum growth, tendency towards healing, tendencies towards those kinds of things. And so for me, when I'm doing any kind of work, it has to come from a place of maximum growth and expansion for everyone. And sometimes that means that you're going to have to, for me, that I'm going to have to let some things go, let some people go. It's not always comfortable. We want love to be a comfortable thing.
Growth is rarely comfortable.
Right, exactly. And it's not always a comfortable thing. In fact, frequently it's not. It's kind of like mushrooms. Frankly,
it all comes back to that.
It all comes back. Well, you've seen Star Trek Discovery, the mycelia that hold the universe together. I want to be that tardigrade. Season 1, I want to be that tardigrade that's like, traveling in that interdimensional mycelial network. That's what I want. Sorry if that's a spoiler alert for anybody.
But I completely agree, and feel very strongly the same, that love is the universal will. And I usually define personal will as like thought and imagination given purpose, because sometimes, like I said, wizards got to pay the rent, so sometimes you need to do things, as long as no one gets hurt. Sometimes that's what you need to focus on. But definitely, I think that to be an agent of kindness, to be an agent of compassion, and sow those radical seeds of goodness wherever you can, is one of the most in line with the universal will things one can do.
Well, and to me, it's some people think that that's kind of real la, and it's like, no, it's not. It's like really hard.
Yeah,
it's like really hard. It's like really hard having compassion for someone you'd rather shoot into space, and that doesn't mean that you put up with what they do.
No,
it doesn't mean that at all.
To understand something is not to excuse it.
Exactly.
So, what is an arc? I keep seeing that reference, and it's expanding your arc through the illumination of the eidolons.
So this is just terminology that because I'm fanciful, and rather than just calling it a list,
like an astro card catalog.
But very similar. It's essentially like it's like your Pokédex, but so uh, to an arc is essentially a sum total of the place in what I would call your tome, which is just your working notebook for your magic. And a tome can be one book that's contiguous or 80,000 notebooks. God knows mine are scattered in like every type of notebook you can imagine, including legal pads. But that includes all of the information of all the eidolons you've contacted, which, if it is a completed entry, would be a seal, a sigil, a call, some information about how they appear to you, or what ways you've worked with them, etc. But very often are snippets. It might just be the seal because you've only illuminated it, and now you're going to meditate and going to contact that eidolon, commune with them, and you'll fill it out as you go. But the arc is essentially the list of eidolons that you have available to work with.
Fascinating indeed.
it's just his nomenclature. I mean, I would say things like your bunch, or your batch, or your I call those sort of like my groupies, the folks that live with me.
Now, there's a lot of unique terminology in there, which is kind of the product of kind of developing a lot of mine in a relative vacuum. Which is funny because when I was younger, I was in an environment that was very accepting of, witchcraft in general. My mother was, involved in various covens in her youth, and she kind of moved away from that because of various coven drama. But she was always very open to, witchcraft and occultism, in general, as long as it was, not done to harm anyone, and mine never has been. So, but I just was never part of a big community. I kind of just was very solitary. I'd sit in my room and I read books. Like I read Crowley when I was young, and I was kind of like, this probably isn't for me. Cool. Happy it was for him. Happy it's for many of my friends, but not my thing. And I just kind of developed my own very meditatively, very observationally, a lot of introspection, a lot of time in nature, a lot of time doing spell work and developing spell work. And so it just came with me having a whole bunch of words for things that were just what I thought was a good word for it when I started doing this. So, yeah, so that's why there is a terminology section in the beginning of the book.
Well, it reminds me of what, Austin Spare did. He created his own sigil system, essentially. And, it worked for him really, really, really well. I don't know how well it works for anybody else. He had his own way of doing it, but it worked apparently incredibly well for him. So it's like, I mean, I that's another thing I appreciated about the book. By the way, I really like the term eidolon. I just haven't seen it in a really, really long time. I was like, when I opened the book, I was like, oh, he's talking about eidolons. Ah! I haven't seen this word in years. So I'm going to have to start thinking about that word now. I love words because of how they're, especially words that haven't been part of our vernacular for a long time. I like to go back and plumb 18th and 19th century vocabularies, to see what words can be brought forward again, because there's just so many words.
That's actually one of the first things when I originally, the first draft of this book was read by two people before it got submitted to Llewellyn, and it was my wife and my mother. My wife does not have a esoteric background. She's very supportive of it and thinks it's very cool, but it's never been for her. My mother does, to a degree, and is also a writer. She actually writes young adult fiction. You can go grab The Secret of the Sea Witch on Amazon. It's a book about a young adult mermaid who is going through some cool witchcraft stuff and has a lot of environmental messages. But my mother, being a writer, immediately read it. And one of the things she said, she's like, I love you, and I think this is well written. It's going to need some editing. But it does sound like it was written by some dude from like 1852. And so I also have a fondness for old language. Some of it had to be edited out before it got to the book you have in your hands.
And who were some of your influences or authors or when you're growing up with all this? There's
So I didn't read, like I said, I didn't read a lot of or incorporate a lot of occult authors. So, I've read Crowley, Levi. Um, I had a lot of my mother's actually older witchcraft books, which were more, earth-based. Read Cunningham, things like that. But most of my linguistic and writing influences come from like Victor Hugo and Alexander Dumas and like
Oh,
things like that.
Dumas. Oh,
Yeah.
Dumas.
Big Neil Gaiman fan.
Oh, yeah. So he's a literary guy. Yeah. Yeah, that's fun.
nice.
That's very fun. So it's what? The Secret of the Sea Witch, and so this is your mom, MD
MD
Muscat.
Mascaro, yes.
Okay. Very cool. Very, very cool.
I've read American Gods.
Great book.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. Also, a big
Sa-
graphic novel fan. Sandman was like amazing, and I actually loved the
No,
Netflix
yeah,
adaptation of it,
I like
which I wasn't
Sandman.
expecting to, because I'm always uncharacteristically cynical about adaptations of books for the screen. So
yeah, graphic novels are a lot of fun. I collect a lot of the Batman and Joker ones and stuff.
Batman's
And
great.
not too long ago, I got a one that Alex Ross did of Fantastic Four by Jack Kirby. He redid it with his art. It's called Full
Very
Circle. Definitely, I need to check that out. But there's some James Tynion Joker solo series that I want to check out, where Joker like goes against this house of cannibals, kind of like House of a Thousand Corpses. But there was those just came out in graphic novel form. I have the comics, but it's
Very cool.
usually easier to read the
I've always
graphic
been a
novels.
Batman fan.
Yeah,
But I think probably characteristically, don't think this surprises anyone. Like, I'm really a big fan of like Alan Moore and like Swamp Thing, Promethea. I like Lock and Key a lot. Like, I like all this stuff. Hellblazer, yeah. So
he's got
I'm a
some
stereotype
Lovecraft.
in that regard.
I have his Lovecraft stuff. He did. I have his Lovecraft stuff. I have Absolute Sandman 1 and 2. I need 3 one year. Like I need to get it before something that goes up in price or something stupid. But
I have actually all of the original issues of the Sandman.
Wow, nice. Those are worth a
Because
lot. You can't
I inherited those though, and I will therefore never give them up from my godfather, who was a really big literary influence in my life. He was a huge, prolific reader and writer and scholar. And when he passed, they were like, "You should have these," and I was like, "You're right, and thank you."
Yeah,
that's a great Capricorn response.
yeah. I've looked those up on eBay. I was like, nope, I'm never gonna open those, but I'll be getting the graphic novels, I guess. But yeah, comics are a mess. They're fun and beautiful. Like I love all the Todd McFarlane Spawn stuff. Like there's Gunslinger Spawn, but there's just so many. It's like a rabbit hole you fall down that you'll drown in if you're not careful.
I used to love the figures as a kid, where I'd see them. I'd be like, "I want this." My mom was like, "Is he like ripping somebody's spine out?" No, I'm not bringing this in the house.
No, Spawn's not ripping someone's spine out. No, of course not. But yeah, Alan Moore's great. I have some of his Lovecraft stuff, but I haven't read it yet, but in graphic novel form. Providence, and there's some other one that I know, and I have to check it out, but for sure. So what about, have you had any paranormal kind of stuff happen because of result of this kind of work?
It's hard to say if it's a result. I don't think I can like empirically say this is a result, because it's something I've been doing my whole life. So literally any experience I could have had could have theoretically been from it. I've had, most of the things people consider paranormal that have happened to me are things I have like done in my own ritual work. So I'm like, it's self-induced. But a couple things that have happened to me when I really try to dig down and think of it. One time I had an experience that I rarely tell people about, because it just seems honestly somewhat cliche. Because I was lying in my bed. I think I was 15 at the time. Moonlight was streaming through the window, but the moonlight was casting shadows onto the floor, not the ceiling, because the angle of where I lived on a hill. But on the ceiling, all of a sudden, I see a shadow of a gigantic wing that moves across my ceiling and then just stops above my bed. And I immediately become like completely terrified. And then I hear in like my mind, I could tell this is, there was no sound. The air wasn't vibrating. I could tell this is in my head. I heard "Be not afraid," and I was like, "Oh, this is some stereotypical, you know."
Angelic
Be not
voice.
afraid.
Be not afraid.
And the other
It's
weird
Halloween.
kind of semi-paranormal thing that happened was the same house up, in the part of New Jersey where the Appalachians moved through New Jersey, and I lived on a little glacial lake up there, and I was sitting this was several years after, I think it was 20 at the time. My mom had to deal with me in her house for several years, I was going to say that. But I was sipping coffee out on the dock of the lake, a little rundown, little cement dock that was half dilapidated, and looking at, and I saw another dock, like 4 docks down, I saw this big dog. And it was this white and reddish dog, like white belly, almost like a husky, only instead of where a husky is like gray or black on top, it was red, and a sunbeam was just coming directly down onto it from the sky, which was otherwise cloudy. And I was like, "That's weird," sitting there drinking my cup of coffee, and like, that's what a coincidence, what a pretty dog standing out on that dock with the sun. And all of a sudden it starts walking towards the end of the dock. I'm like, "Okay, where are you going, dog?" And the dog walks off the dock and proceeds to still walk while it is in midair for about 10 feet, and then kind of looks very briefly at me and then just disappears.
Wow.
And I was like, "Well,
That's
this is a
interesting.
thing." So,
This is the thing. I'm drinking my coffee, man.
yeah.
So I'm drinking my coffee.
So you saw a dog walk off at like a dock, and it just kind of like was in the air. Maybe it was like a spirit dog or something.
It could be. I've really, one of the things is I know that I have a tendency to attempt to find explanations naturally. I have an inclination towards it. Probably comes from my grandfather, who was very, very mathematically and scientifically inclined. But I have really learned to not do that anymore. Like, when things happen, I'm just like, I can't explain that. And you know what? Maybe I never will. I'm going to accept that experience for what it was, be grateful that it happened, and it evoked some sort of wonder in me at how little I actually probably know about existence, and I'm going to finish my cup of coffee.
It reminds me of a story. One time I was tripping at a lake on Halloween with my brother and a friend, and it was Halloween, and I went off on my own and heard weird music, and the water seemed warm, like warmer than it should be at this beautiful lake. And I saw reptilian-like beings, but they weren't physical. It was like they were like kind of like holograms or something. And one was like a hydra. The other one was humanoid and had some kind of weird, I don't know, almost I would say like, I don't think it was snakes, but it makes you kind of think of Medusa or something. And there may have been another one. I don't remember what that one looked like. I just remember the hydra and that humanoid. But I thought I was seeing fallen angels of the devil. But they kept saying, "We love you, sing, dance," right? And they're saying like Deepak Chopra stuff to me. so it's kind of confusing, but I'll never forget it. I don't know what it was, but I have these oracle cards or like wood glyphs from Mayan gods, and some of the weird pictures of their gods. That's what it reminds me of. But it was strange, and I'll never forget it. But that night, there's 2 Gregs there. My brother said he saw big red eyes out in the woods, and this other big Greg dude was doing like diet pills or something, and he like acted possessed and tried to drive us into the lake. Like, it was scary.
With the serpent stuff, like, to me, in the quote unquote Western, sensibility, we have this idea, like, there's a lot of stigmatization of the serpent, but the serpent in a lot of cultures is a symbol of wisdom, and closeness to the land. And I mean, I'm always going to come here and talk about how snakes are awesome because I have snakes and like them. So, but I think that's really cool having some serpentine beings be like, "Hey man, go out there and dance." Like, I like that.
Yeah. What kind of snakes do you have? I used to work at Petco and take care of a lot of them.
I have 4. I have a corn snake, king snake, a ball python, and a Taiwanese beauty snake.
What are their names?
Oh man, there are Astarte, Shakti, Celeborn, and Raijin.
Nice.
I love snakes personally. I just
I
think
love it
snakes
too.
are
The
wonderful.
energy.
They're wonderful, wonderful creatures.
I agree.
You know,
I
I
spend a
mean,
lot of time with them.
well, and I do, you know, some of the ceremonial stuff I do is Naga stuff. I just
Oh, very
really, I mean, I've had them appear in my dreams. You know, that's one of the energies that I work
cool.
with a lot, and
That's
I
very cool.
I just really love snakes a lot.
When I was young, or I mean, I'm still young, I think. when I
You're
was
young for
very
me.
little,
I mean, you're you know, you're much younger than I am. So,
but when I was like 11 or 10, my mom, she was a fine arts teacher for her day job, and she has a master's in fine arts, and she did a lot of metal sculpture, and she did this pendant of a Minoan snake goddess
mm,
that, like, to this day I remember, and she probably still has somewhere, and I want, but I know it's one of her favorites too, so I'm probably not going to get it. But like, I've always had like kind of that. It's probably the earliest memories of where I got an association with like snakes are cool. It was probably from that Minoan snake goddess pendant my mom made.
yeah, they are cool. I mean, they're like there are different types of animals, several types of animals that I like to just watch. You know, like I love to watch snakes, and I love to watch spiders. Actually, I really
Oh yeah,
really
spiders are
into
very cool.
spiders. I know people that like it's become sort of a thing to have like little jumping spiders as pets.
Yeah,
Started breeding them and stuff because they are really cute. Now, if they were the size of a dog or a car, we'd feel differently about them. But you know, we could be terrified of them. But I do think spiders are very cool, and I like to watch them, and I also like to watch cats. You know,
yeah,
so those are, I mean, these are animals that I can just sit and watch. You know how they move, how they just are.
yeah.
You know, I just think they're beautiful.
I agree.
Octopuses are another one. I
Oh, they're
got
very
to
cool too.
meet an octopus once I was on fellowship after graduate school in Washington D.C. for a year, and I would go to the National Zoo like almost every other weekend or something. And you go early before the crowds come, right when they open, and you can see all these cool things. And I went into the invertebrate house one morning before anybody else was there, and they had just gotten a new octopus in, and they were putting her in her tank and getting her oriented. And I'd started talking to some of the keepers, and they were like, "Do you want to meet Chloe?" And I was like, "Sure." So I got to meet this octopus. She was so cool. It's like the way. Well, you apparently know instantly if they don't like you. If they don't like you, they spray you with a siphon and run away and they don't know why. It's like it's just something they're sensing,
Yeah.
on you. But she liked me. But what you do is you put your hand down, and then their tentacles come and they run their tentacles up your arm, and then she would rise up out of the water and just look at you,
Oh, that's so cool.
just look at you,
Oh,
and you could tell there was a person there.
oh yeah,
There was
yeah.
intelligence there. And I can't eat octopuses. I used to eat them, but I can't anymore because
I
I met
I
one.
don't eat any animals for
Yeah.
much the same reason. Like, because I have had so many experiences with them where I've been like, you are conscious, and now I'm going to feel bad. So
Yes. I'm afraid I haven't yet felt that way about chickens, and I do like chickens. I've known chickens. I think and the way I explain it is, I don't know. I like chickens. I've had chickens as pets. I was raised on a farm for the first part of my life. It's like I like chickens. They're wonderful people. They taste good. I'm sure I try to be ethical in what chickens I eat, but it's kind of like I haven't quite made that shift
yeah.
with everything, but
Well, I
certainly
also
some
spend most of my
animals are
time with
that way.
snakes, and like no one's ever asked me to eat one, so that would
Oh
that would
no,
have to come up.
I wouldn't
But
be able to eat a steak unless I was starving. Now, if I was starving, I would probably eat anything. If I was
well, I mean,
absolutely
starvation is starvation.
yeah,
But
exactly.
I
I
think
think you
of
need people. I think if
I mean, we have historical references for this, but
yes,
coming back
right.
to spiders, I love spiders, but I will never have a spider because my wife is terrified of spiders. So I very often am called on to take one in like a piece of paper and a cup and go,
Well,
But
at
then
least you
I
take them
just-
out. You don't. At least you don't kill them. You don't take you. You don't. At least you don't kill them. I mean, I take them out if they're the wrong kind of spider to be in the house. You know, some spiders need to be outside,
Yeah.
or in the wintertime. Now I take them down to the basement.
Yeah.
But I don't kill them.
Yeah, if left to my own devices, I'd just be like, "Hey, spider, what's up? You're not bothering me. I'm just gonna." But my wife is like, "No, he's fine. You just need to make him leave." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine."
Right. I mean, we have cellar spiders in the house. I live in a household where no being, no arthropod is summarily killed just because it exists. You know, we usually let them hang out. I don't want them in my food, you know. So
Well,
like,
yeah.
you know, I mean, I make some provisions, but we don't kill them. So.
And let's see, what was it? Oh, I came across some paranormal encounters of a being that looked like the reptilian humanoid throughout the South that were like these reports. And it was very similar to what I saw, but there was no hydro with it or whatever. That must have been his Fred Barney or whatever, his friend Barney. But it was kind of eerie to come across those paranormal encounter stories, and it was a similar being that people had seen in other states in the South. It looked definitely strange.
Yeah.
But it's been great having you on, JR, and that's JR Mascaro, Seal, Sigil, and Call, a new approach to ritual magic. And do you have a link or anything you want to give out?
You can go to my website at jrmascaro.com. There is a button right on the homepage if you want to go buy the book, and there's also a tab for all my events, book signings, etc., conventions I'll be at.
Very cool. And one thing I want to say about Capricorns, I see a lot of these tarot people like to throw us in with the devil card. That's what they do in those readings. They're like Capricorn devil card.
I guess it's the horns, maybe.
Yeah, it's like some pan stereotypical. Typical. But I saw a lot of them do it, and I was like, I looked it up. We haven't gotten into it, you know, deeper than that, but it's just stereotyping Capricorns. They're also supposed to be stockbrokers too, according to a lot of these dumb sites.
I'm a big fan of Capricorn personally. I'm not one. I wish I was one, but I am a fan of Capricorn. So.
Saturn.
And we appreciate
I want to come back in a future. If I have to come back here, I want to come back as a Capricorn. If I have to come back here, hope I don't have to.
Old friend, we got like 3 minutes, but Blake Downing, Juggalo Squatcher, a Juggalo who used to, you know, he's still into Bigfoot, but used to go out in the field. He said in a comment, "It made me happy to hear you prank call the dog place."
I heard
from last episode, and what it was is this crazy dog crappy place that was torturing beagles with weird stuff. One day I got mad after Christina showed me some stuff, and I said, I wanted to do something. We did the little sign, so I prank called them. I was like, "Hell's coming!" Like I said weird stuff. I was careful and didn't, it wasn't threatening or whatever, something like that. But anyway, that place got shut down shortly after.
Nice.
And so I was right. I was like, "Hell's coming." And hell came and shut them down. It was from like all those people signing the thing and all that stuff. But they were doing crazy stuff to dogs, like my dog Jack, who passed away of 16 years. It was similar to, he had some of that beagle in him or whatever. But that's what made me even madder. So I started prank calling them. But Blake Downing, this is TMI, I know, but once Blake Downing said he heard someone rib a fart on the show when I was co-hosting with Beazle. It wasn't me.
Wasn't me because
Beazle said it was Beazle. But Beazle said chair, so he might have been playing it off. But I'm just saying, when he said that, I cried so hard laughing. I heard somebody rib a fart on the show. But anyway, on that note, I have to watch the French
Thank
Dispatch.
you so much, Jeffrey, for that.
I think the French Dispatch is the only Wes Anderson movie I haven't seen yet. I may be watching that soon. So, and The Last of Us on HBO about the fungi zombies. Check it out. It's supposed to be like really good. The game is really good, but they say it's really good, so that's good. But thanks so much, JR and Wham, and thanks everybody for listening to United Public Radio.
Right, JR.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Much
Keep us
success.
in the loop in the future. And Capricorn, Saturn. Let me not know. Hitler did that with Saturn, sons of Saturn. So we're not going to do that. Not good. But that he had a little Saturn fetish. I bet he wasn't a Capricorn. He did have one testicle like me, which is freaky. They sung songs about
I
it.
don't think that is a necessary Capricorn.
I don't know if he was a Capricorn. I don't think he was, but maybe. I don't know. I hope not.
Oh,
We already got Marilyn Manson. We got to get rid of him because he's being a freak. I used to like his music, but now all these weird stories, it's hard to listen to his music. But I did see Antichrist Superstar Tour in 1996. That was freaking insane in Atlanta. But anywho, everybody have a good weekend. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Take care, JR.
Keep us in the loop on future stuff. We'll get you back on. Thanks, man.
Definitely will. Thank you for having me.
Take it
care.
easy. Bye-bye.